Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to continue our trade guide series here on the channel leading up to the 2025 NBA trade deadline. And as you can see from the title, thumbnail, and also the graphic here on the screen now, we are covering the Brooklyn Nets, one of the most active teams so far this season. They've already made a few big trades and they're in line to make a few more as well. They're an essential team to talk about before the 2025 NBA trade deadline. So what are we going to discuss today? Well, first we're going to cover the franchise trajectory of this team and those recent trades. What does that kind of tell us? What do we know about the Brooklyn Nets now as a result of those deals? We're also then going to look at their draft pick control. They have a very vast collection of total draft picks. Also, their luxury tax status, I think, is an extremely important topic and one that we definitely have to cover quickly in today's video. We'll also look at the tradable players and contracts that they have, specifically one big name player who's going to be highly sought after on the trade market this year, I believe. Also look at some of the potential trade partners who could be interested in that player or a collection of other Brooklyn Nets pieces. We'll look at the long-term plan that Sean Marks and the Nets have internally, and also the long-term projected activity level. What do I expect them to do this trade deadline, and how does that kind of play into their future plans as well? So when it comes to their recent trades, remember they traded Dorian Finney-Smith and Shake Milton to the Los Angeles Lakers for Maxwell Lewis, D'Angelo Russell, and a collection of second-round picks. I thought a very solid deal. Now, Dorian Finney-Smith was shooting the ball very, very well from three for Brooklyn, but I think one thing that has been overlooked about Dorian Finney-Smith over the last couple of years, specifically from the 2022 Western Conference Finals run the Dallas Mavericks had to where Dorian Finney-Smith presently is as a player, I think defensively has lost like about half a step. And that might not sound like a lot, but with his archetype defensively as a bigger wing, a forward who can guard up across multiple different lineups, and specifically small forwards, power forwards in the NBA, one of the biggest strengths of his back when he was in Dallas was his defensive versatility, switching onto guards, defending out on the perimeter, whether it be guarding someone like Devin Booker, at times defending Chris Paul in some of those Mavericks-Suns matchups. The Mavericks really relied on Dorian Finney-Smith to be a point-of-attack defender and stopper, even against smaller, quicker players, and with that half step being gone, it hasn't brought the same kind of defensive intensity to Brooklyn and now to Los Angeles. So I think the Nets traded him at the right time, got a decent collection of second-round picks for him, opening up further flexibility for them in future trades, which I think is an important discussion. And remember, before that, they traded Dennis Schroeder to the Golden State Warriors. The Nets have been able to cash in on some players having career years, and that's a testament to Jordi Fernandez. There's not, a surprise here for me. If you go back to how I talked about Jordi Fernandez when the Nets first hired him, I was very optimistic that this guy was going to be a very good coach, coming from the Mike Brown coaching tree in Sacramento. Spent some time with Mike Brown prior to that as well. Now listen, Jordi Fernandez has a longer shelf life as a coach now than Mike Brown did this season, of course. But I think it's not a surprise to see these players having career years for the Brooklyn Nets in a lot of ways. Schroeder, a real resurgence. Dorian Finney-Smith shooting the ball so well. Cam Johnson having a career year. That's all a testament to the coaching. I think one of the most overlooked things in the NBA is the value of coaching. When we talk about the NFL and football, everybody knows that. They look at, the head coach as a culture setter, the X's and O's mastermind, the guy who sets your scheme. The same is true in the NBA, except it's a little bit more unique. Yes, you do need, I think, more top-end talent in the NBA to compete with the LeBron James, Steph Currys of the world, but it's still very, very important in the NBA, and I think the Brooklyn Nets right now are a shining example of that, maximizing the value of some of their veterans, now trading them out the door to kind of align their coaching and the success this season with their long-term plans, which is tanking and acquiring more draft capital. It's worked out brilliantly for the Brooklyn Nets, because the franchise trajectory really points toward them being a team focused on capturing the flag, and that flag being Cooper Flag of the Duke Blue Devils, the former McDonald's All-American top-end recruit, right? The guy who teams are going to want at the top of the draft in 2025. And I think it's important to note the Nets have not made a lottery pick in the NBA draft since moving to Brooklyn. So after, trades for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Jason Terry, other trades for James Harden, moves for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in free agency, the Nets have either been bad and didn't have their draft pick, or have been pretty good and have not had a lottery pick, and specifically picks to develop top-end talent. Now, they've done well with some of their first-round picks along the way. You think about Jarrett Allen, where they grabbed him. You think about Nick Claxton, grabbing him in the second round. You think about Cam Thomas, of course, back into the first round. I think Sean Marks has a pretty good track record of finding success in the draft. He just hasn't had those lottery picks to grab the top end, upper echelon talent and have that talent homegrown. They've found creative ways to bring in star talent. Hasn't always worked out in the long run, but the Nets finally have a shot at really getting a top-end player, and I think the franchise trajectory as a result of that is looking very, very good. Not to mention they have other first-round picks as well, so someone like Yegor Demon from BYU or maybe an Alex Caravan from UConn. Some of these players with other skill sets, whether that be ball handling, primary initiation, or kind of a guy like Caravan who's a fit into your offense as kind of a Nick Batum type of role, someone who's going to be a ball mover, a movement shooter, and someone who can also fit as a cutter, stationary guy, does a lot of nice auxiliary things around your offense as well. So I think the Nets are in a really good position to add young talent, and their future draft pick control is just incredible. This year they have their own pick, they have the Bucks pick, the Knicks pick, of course the Mikal Bridges trade specifically. You look at that long laundry list of everything they got for Kevin Durant, it is ludicrous. They had so many, and I mean so many, draft assets from trading Kevin Durant. It was a no-brainer home run trade for the Brooklyn Nets, one that has really shifted the organization very well toward losing, and losing in a way where they're going to have a real chance at getting the first, second, third overall pick. It's not like we're talking about a 1, 2, 3% chance to win the lottery. They're going to have a substantial, significant chance to be picking at the very top of the 2025 draft, and they have control of a lot of their future stuff as well. Not all of it. The Rockets still have a little bit of control, especially in 2027, but they were able to get their 2025 and 2026 picks back from Houston. It did cost them the Suns pick, but they still have other picks along the way. One from Philadelphia, a few from the Knicks as well from that Bridges trade I already referenced. So Brooklyn's in a really great position draft pick wise. And luxury tax status, this is not something you would expect to be important for a team that is tanking and rebuilding, but the Nets do have a good deal of money committed to their salary. You think about how much Cam Johnson's making, you think about Nick Claxton's new deal, and just all in all, Ben Simmons specifically being such a massive contract on their books too. The Nets do have a lot of money committed to their current roster, so that is essential to keep in mind. They only have $677,000 of space against luxury tax. To a normal human being, $677,000 sounds like so much money, right? But in the NBA, that's really a drop in the bucket, and making one weird trade that increases their salary would actually be potentially disastrous for Brooklyn. So you have to figure this team is going to stay below the luxury tax. Joe Tsai has no problem with spending. He's done so in the past. But I think calculated spending is always one of the most important things for a GM. You don't want to write a tax bill for your owner for a team that's going to have a better chance at the first overall pick than they do at winning a playoff series. So I think with that in mind, the Brooklyn Nets are not a team that will go into the luxury tax. So any mock trades you see for the Brooklyn Nets, it's almost essential they're either taking a dollar for dollar trade where they're not increasing their salary, or even more likely they're even shedding some salary to make sure that they have room against the tax in case, some other trade comes to fruition. They want to have a little bit of flexibility there too. So keep that in mind in any of these potential mock trades you see moving forward. And here are some of their key tradable players. Cam Johnson right at the top of the list. Like I said earlier, having a serious career year, shooting the ball extremely well. I think showcasing more of his on-ball talent a bit this year too. Asked to do a little bit more now with the absence of Mikal Bridges. And I think with Jordi Fernandez's offense, specifically the pacing, the space, and also kind of the on-ball opportunities that are afforded in advantage specifically for Cam Johnson have really allowed him to be an awesome player this season, and one that contenders will significantly show interest in. His contract's very fair value, one that is easily affordable by multiple different teams around the league, and a very easy to trade contract, and one where the Nets are looking for 2+ first-round picks. They're going to get that out in the market this year, honestly. If you look at the deals around the league right now, a player making, there's not been a player traded making more than $20 million at the time I'm recording this. And I think that is a testament to the new CBA, but a player like Cam Johnson who's making just marginally more than $20 million, not a significant amount more than that, he's the type of player that contenders and teams kind of hoping to be contenders could see putting them over the top, adding him into their starting lineup as kind of this off-ball, on-ball congruent fit around their star talent already present on roster. Nick Claxton's a player who, with his new contract, I really don't see him getting traded this year, to be honest. He hasn't had the most tremendous year. He's been good in stretches, but also has had some moments where, I think some contenders would be curious about what he's going to be for them long term. I'm still a big Nick Claxton believer. The defense hasn't quite been what it was a couple of years ago, where he was arguably a deep poi candidate. He is just not that this season at all, but he's still a good player and one that I think the Nets probably don't find a trade for this year. Cam Thomas, another kind of complicated one. Such a small salary, it's going to be difficult for the Nets to trade him and also get value back for him, because you're looking at guys who are almost on minimum contracts in terms of salary matching here. So Brooklyn, I mean, there's teams with cap space like Detroit. Detroit would be a really fascinating Cam Thomas spot, honestly, because they have cap space. They could just absorb him. But again, I think there's questions about Cam Thomas and what he's going to be for a contending team compared to a team like Brooklyn, where right now he can have the ball in his hands, can do a lot of the scoring, and I think he's been a very efficient, effective scorer. I think he's a real talented player and one that I think, honestly, Brooklyn's going to want to keep. They have restricted free agency rights on him this offseason. I don't think trading him is the most sensible thing in the world, and for that reason, I think the Nets will ultimately keep him, but we'll see. So when it comes to potential trade partners, this is specifically talking more so about Cam Johnson. There is a huge host of teams. In fact, I have 9 teams on the graphic here. Almost 1/3 of the NBA will express significant interest in Cam Johnson. The Atlanta Hawks are a team that makes a ton of sense. With Clint Capella recently losing his starting center spot to Antetokounmpo, which is not surprising, by the way. Okongwu was playing way more minutes as of late than Capella, even when Capella was still a starter. The Hawks are a team that, with Capella's expiring salary, I think would be a real match for Cam Johnson. Now, it would leave Atlanta kind of thin at the actual center spot. Their rebounding would be a little suspect and questionable long term, but I do think for Atlanta specifically, when you watch them play, it does just seem like they're a little kind of weak on perimeter talent. Cam Johnson could be a really beneficial addition to their team without kind of subtracting from the way that they play, where Trae Young is so ball dominant. You get into the high pick and roll, him and Jalen Johnson kind of working out of short rolls. Cam Johnson, again, could be a great ancillary player around that kind of combination in Atlanta. The contracts line up pretty well, and for Brooklyn, a team that's prioritizing cap space this offseason, Capella's expiring deal does make some sense. The Hawks have a couple of first-round picks, specifically in 2025, after their DeJounte Murray trade to New Orleans. So the Hawks and Nets could be a real combination to watch for this trade deadline. The Golden State Warriors probably not going to actually be the team that pulls the trigger on a Cam Johnson deal, but they do have a collection of different salaries that could help get them there. Gary Payton II, Kevon Looney, for example, of course, Buddy Hield's contract. They have a few different options or pathways to getting to the money to get Cam Johnson, and they do have control of a majority of their own future first-round picks, so they could be a team that could line up for him. Detroit, we talked about maybe as a surprise Cam Thomas team. I think Cam Johnson's another one that just makes a lot of sense for Detroit. There was a lot of reported rumors and interest when Monty Williams became the coach in Detroit. Now, ultimately, nothing came to fruition there, but Trajan Langdon, former Pelicans front office member, right, looking at improving Detroit. They're a team right now that's in playoff positioning, looking to really make a push, even with Jaden Ivey out for the season due to an injury, unfortunately. I think putting a player like Cam Johnson around the heliocentric star that Cade Cunningham is becoming does make, in a vacuum, some good deal of sense. The Pistons have some draft capital to work with as well, where they can maybe find a deal. Houston, I don't think the Rockets will be a huge player for Cam Johnson, but I need to mention them because they have so many draft picks. They have a lot of expiring salaries. Again, these are two teams, just like I talked about with Atlanta and Capella. If the Nets are looking to shed salary, which is exactly what they're looking to do, we'll talk about that more in just a couple of minutes. The Rockets could be a team that provides that. Jock Landale is essentially an expiring contract. Steven Adams, Jayshawn Tate, Jeff Green. The Rockets have ways to get to certain money points for the Nets to get a deal done, which would be very fascinating to see if one actually materializes. The Rockets have control of some of their own future first-round picks. They have control of the Phoenix Suns' future first-round picks, and a few others sprinkled in there as well. So for Houston, specifically, you're looking at a team with a bunch of tradable contracts, ones that I think Brooklyn would be okay with taking since they're expiring, and also draft capital. And I think you put those two things together, you have a significant suitor potentially for Cam Johnson. Now, I think the Rockets have their eyes on a bigger fish, one that plays as a shooting guard in Phoenix wearing the number 1. I'm not going to say his name here. You guys know who I'm talking about. I don't think Houston's pushing right now for Cam Johnson. I think they're looking for something a little bit bigger, but still something to watch for. The Pacers have been a rumored team as well. They have Miles Turner's expiring contract, although I just don't think Indiana's going to trade Miles Turner. So then you maybe look at some combination of Obi Toppin plus some of their other pieces in there, right? There's a bunch of different ways they could get to that. TJ McConnell possibly. You also look at someone like Aaron Nesmith, who's on one of the better contracts in the NBA, someone who I think Brooklyn would value getting in return. The Pacers do have tradable first-round picks. Just another shooter that makes sense. The Grizzlies, I think, should be considered the favorite for Cam Johnson. If you trade Marcus Smart plus a young player or two, whether that be a Jake LaRavia, maybe the Nets would really want G.G. Jackson, for example. I don't think Jalen Wells would be included in this. He's had such a good rookie year for them. But the Grizzlies could be a team that looks at Cam Johnson being the final missing puzzle piece in their starting lineup around Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Zach Edey long term. Of course, they have really good backup, big depth as well with Santi Aldama. Jay Huff's played a really nice role for them, as well as a few others. So the Grizzlies are in a spot where the team is really deep. They have young talent that they could give up. They have a vast majority of their first-round picks going forward. In fact, I believe all of them. So the Grizzlies could be a perfect landing spot in theory for Cam Johnson, and I think they should be the team that pulls the trigger. Orlando could make some sense. They've dealt with so many injuries, though, this year. They're already kind of strong at the forward wing spot anyway, so they're kind of one of those secondary teams where, if they did something around KCP's contract, even though I don't think Brooklyn would love that as much, they have draft picks. Orlando does. They have Denver's this year. They have rights to all of their own future first as well. So Orlando's in a spot where they could easily make a trade for Cam Johnson if they really wanted to push for it. Might cost them 3 first-round picks in KCP's contract, but maybe that would be something they would explore since Paolo and Franz Wagner do so much ball handling there anyway. Cam Johnson could give them this unique length and size kind of combination into their front court. OKC, a team that's been heavily rumored for Cam Johnson. I don't really see Sam Presti making this kind of trade. The tax bill is going to get rather expensive rather quickly for OKC. I don't see them making big-time buy moves for players right now. If anything, I see them trading draft picks for other draft picks to kind of maximize the value that they have and maybe consolidate some of their draft picks to more valuable ones like we just saw Utah do with the 2031 Phoenix first. And then the Kings, again, another team that I think with their recent winning streak, listen, they don't have a huge void in their starting lineup, but if Sacramento can add talent and improve with how well they've been playing under Doug Christie, there's a real likelihood here that the Kings could look at themselves internally as a dangerous buyer at the trade deadline. They have some draft picks to trade. They have contracts that they could theoretically move. Kevin Huerter's is an example. Trey Lyles is another one. You put those two contracts together, you get to the money for Cam Johnson. It would be very fascinating to see if a trade materializes here. Either way, the main story here from this part of the video and this graphic is the fact that Cam Johnson, not only is he extremely valued right now, the market for him is extremely large. He's got so many different teams that I could see as realistic suitors. Now, some of them less likely than others, but nonetheless, Cam Johnson is going to be highly coveted and a player who can make a ton of sense for a variety of different teams looking to make improvements at the trade deadline in 2025. So when it comes to the long-term plan, what are the Nets building? What is the actual goal there? And if they trade Cam Johnson, some people might be wondering, okay, well, what's kind of the hope here? What's kind of the expectation and the goal? Well, ultimately, landing a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo would be at the top of the totem pole for the Brooklyn Nets, something that they would be extremely fascinated with getting done. The Nets essentially have 11 expiring contracts right now before any Cam Johnson trade. If they trade Cam Johnson for an expiring salary or two, they could potentially have 12, 13 expiring contracts going into this offseason with max cap space. And depending on how they play their cards here, they could either look to improve the team via free agency and the draft this offseason, something similar to what we saw the Rockets do in the last couple of years, signing both Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet while drafting in the top 10 as well. Or you could see them, maybe aggressively target. They have so many draft picks that they could easily get involved for someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo if he does ask out of Milwaukee. We've seen Sean Marks get creative in the past to target star-level players. He's aggressively done that with guys like James Harden. Of course, free agency landed both Kyrie and Kevin Durant. So he is accustomed to landing big fish out in the market when they become available and make sense. And even though the Nets right now are at a weird spot where you might not look at them as soon-to-be contenders, let's say they walk out with the first or second pick in the draft or getting Cooper Flag or Dylan Harper, and then they maybe make some big trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and they have cap space to still sign one or two more impact free agents. This team with Nick Claxton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Cam Thomas as a restricted free agent with a very small cap hold going into this offseason, Dylan Harper or Cooper Flag, that's a pretty competitive team pretty quickly. And I think that would be the hope there for Brooklyn, and they have other first-round picks to either make more winning trades or they have first-round picks to supplement the depth and young talent on the roster, which would be very fascinating either way. They're in a really, really good spot right now, and a team that I think is going to be positioned to make some noise this trade deadline. I really hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content as well. It was a lot of fun to cover the Brooklyn Nets in this one. Again, I think they are a hot button topic team when it comes to the 2025 NBA trade deadline. I would be shocked if the Nets don't make 1 or 2 moves at least. I think they're going to be extremely active and a team that we really have to watch for when it comes to big splashy trades, both now and moving forward, with their hopes of maybe alluring a star player or two once again to Brooklyn going forward. Thanks all so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.